The rain on planet Riso did not fall, it stayed. It pounded the metal roof of Outpost Franklin with a relentless, heavy hum that made the human infantry squad quarters feel smaller by the hour. Water filled the perimeter trenches, turning the red clay outside into a thick, sucking mud. Inside the squad quarters, the air smelled of damp wool, gun oil, and recycled coffee. Carmen Ayala, the squad's medic, tossed her medical kit onto her bunk. It was midday, but the thick storm clouds outside made it look like twilight. "Someone gives up the bones," Ayala said. Her voice cut straight through the steady patter of the storm. Sergeant Jack Brown looked up from a half-assembled weapon. He glanced across the room toward a corner bunk, then looked at Luis Gomez. "Come on, man. We know you got the bones," Brown said. Gomez whined aloud, but he reached under his mattress, pulling out a faded velvet pouch filled with white dominoes. They pushed two metal footlockers together in the center of the room to form a makeshift table. Ayala took one side and motioned for Gomez to take the seat across from her, while Brown slid onto the other side. Nina Harley, the squad's gunner, stepped out of the shadows by the gun rack. She dusted chalk from her fingers and took the seat across from Brown. Gomez dumped the bones onto the metal surface and shuffled them. The sharp clacking briefly cut through the endless rain outside as the game began. The four soldiers drew 7 bones, each from the face-down pile. Brown grinned, slamming down the double six with a sharp crack against the metal footlocker. Gomez made a face, his hand hovering over his own bones, looking for 6 to play. The door burst open, and Private Matthew stumbled into the quarters, dripping water everywhere. "Sergeant Brown, they want you in ops right away," Matthew said, breathing hard from running. Ayala, Harley, and Gomez shouted together, "Close the door." Brown flipped his remaining bones face up on the table, revealing a strong hand. He smiled at Ayala and Gomez. "You guys are lucky. I was about to bring the house down," Brown said. He stood up, looking across the table at Harley. "Do me a favor and finish putting that weapon together for me," Brown asked. Harley nodded. "Will do, Sarge," she replied. Matthew stood by the open door waiting, as Brown stepped out into the downpour, with Matthew following closely behind him. He walked past a few bunkers before arriving at the ops security doors. Inside ops, the atmosphere was suffocating. Admiral Way, Captain Lewis, and Lieutenant Maria Beck stood gathered around the primary holomap. Admiral Way looked furious, his jaw tightly set as he stared at the holomap with his arms crossed. "I am sorry for taking you from your downtime, Sergeant," Admiral Way said, "but we have a high-priority target that needs an escort." He paused, taking a deep breath while staring at the glowing holomap. "She needs to be taken to the dead zone." Brown looked between the 3 officers, placing his right hand on his waist. "Who?" Brown asked. Lieutenant Beck stepped forward. Her voice was calm and cold. "She is a female Nectari, and that is all you need to know. Just get her there safely, Sergeant," Beck said. Looking straight into Beck's eyes, Brown tried hard not to be disrespectful. "Nectari don't value anything, not even life," Brown explained. Admiral Way looked deeply uncomfortable, his eyes avoiding Brown's gaze entirely. Brown shifted his stance toward the Admiral. "Is there something you guys are not telling me?" Brown asked respectfully. Beck avoided looking at Brown. "Those are your orders, Sergeant. Get your squad ready. The transport will be here in 1 hour," Beck said sharply. Brown turned around, giving Beck a thumb up. "Roger that," he said, walking back out into the downpour. Inside the quarters, the domino game was heating up. Each slam piece struck the footlockers with a sharp crack. Brown walked in and yelled over the loud noise of the game. "Everyone listen. We have a high-value target that needs to be escorted to the dead zone. We are moving in 1 hour. Gear up and get ready." Harley dropped a domino tile while looking up at Brown. "Hey, Sarge, who are we moving?" she asked. Brown's face grew serious. "A female Nectari," Brown answered. Ayala's eyes widened instantly. "What the heck, Sarge? Is this some kind of punishment?" Ayala shouted. Brown shook his head. "Those are our orders," he said, pulling his armor vest off the wall rack. The transport arrived on time. The high-ranking brass waited in the heavy downpour as the ship landed. A Nectari woman exited the ship, escorted by her own people. She looked young, around early 20s in human years. Her skin was a distinct yellow, with a sharp blue line running from her shoulder down to her wrist. Her eyes were a piercing light blue, reflecting deep sadness. She stood close to 5 feet tall, with a mix of black and white hair. A chains bound her wrists together. Brown stared at her, thoroughly confused. She looked like her life was already over, and he couldn't understand why her own people were handing her over to humans. The handover was simple with no complications. Beck stepped into the downpour, joining the squad. Apparently, she was coming along too. Brown was quiet, watching the exchange closely. The lieutenant wrapped an arm around the Nectari woman's shoulders, guiding her through the mud toward the tactical vehicle. Inside the vehicle, Ayala took the driver's seat. Gomez sat in the back, and Harley climbed into the weapon turret. They all got in without saying a single word. Brown's instincts were driving him crazy. Everything so far told him to ask questions, but he got into the front passenger seat quietly. He buckled his harness and signaled Ayala to move out. The squad vehicle exited through the back gate of Outpost Franklin. About 2 miles from the outpost, Brown ordered, "Ayala, stop the vehicle." The vehicle slammed to a halt in the muddy road. Brown turned around to face the lieutenant. "Okay, Lieutenant, we're not going anywhere until you spill the beans." "Who is she?" Brown asked firmly. Beck's face flushed red with anger as she screamed, "Drive." Up in the turret, Harley laughed. "Hey, Sarge, she thinks she is in charge," Harley said. Beck threatened the squad, shouting, "I will bring you up on charges if this vehicle doesn't move right now." Brown leaned back frustrated and said, "Ma'am, you can scream all you want, but I need a clear answer if I'm going to put the lives of my people on the line." The Nectari woman spoke in a low voice. "Benai Akai and I, so you." She extended both arms. A sharp metallic click followed. Then the chains fell from her wrists and dropped to the floorboards. The vehicle's translator processed her alien language, rendering, "I am no threat to you." Brown went still for a moment. "Great. A magic trick," he said under his breath. Beck looked directly at the Nectari woman and seemed about to cry. "She is a present," Beck said in a low, shaking voice. "A present? What do you mean a present?" Gomez repeated from the back seat, looking at Beck. "The Nectari Council offered her in exchange for peace to stop the war. We need to take her to Donai," Beck explained. Ayala turned her head, looking directly at Brown. "Sarge, to Tehran? They kill everyone there," Ayala said. Brown looked straight into the Nectari woman's sad eyes and asked, "Are you okay with this?" The woman took a deep breath and answered, "I am one life, given so many can live." The vehicle translator rendered her words. No one inside the vehicle said anything. Even Gomez looked away as he tried not to cry. The armored vehicle idled heavily in the mud as the reality of the mission settled over the squad. The continuous downpour drummed against the hull, matching the rising tension inside. "Is this what we are doing? Handing her over to monsters? Peace means nothing to them," Gomez said as he held his weapon tighter. Beck wiped a tear from her cheek as her voice hardened. The Nectari Council negotiated the terms. If she isn't delivered to the dead zone rendezvous point within 7 days, they will launch an orbital strike over the Nectari homeworld, Beck explained. Brown stared at the young woman. Her yellow skin seemed muted under the dim lights, the blue line on her arm pulsing with a faint glow. "You're being sent to die," Brown said. The Nectari woman looked Brown dead in the eye without flinching. Her gaze remained steady despite the sorrow as she whispered, "Honora Kai Lubet." The translator rendered, "One life can save millions." Suddenly, the radar flared. "We have contact. Moving fast ahead," Harley shouted from the turret. "Weapons hot." Ayala, engage the cloaking system, Brown ordered without hesitation. Ayala activated the cloaking system. The vehicle vanished into the darkness. The heavy rain helped cool the engine exhaust faster. "Shut the engine off," Brown commanded as they settled into hiding. Brown turned his glare straight to Beck. "Why are we involved in this?" Brown asked. "Sergeant, the Nectari royal family asked for you specifically," Beck revealed. Brown looked confused. "I don't know any Nectari royals," Brown said. The Nectari woman turned her head. She blew her breath onto the cold glass of the window, tracing a small pattern in the fog as the vehicle translation rendered her words with clarity. "Oh, Sergeant, but we know you well. Your honor is unmatched. You will sacrifice yourself for what is right, even if it costs you everything." Gomez asked from the back seat. "What the heck is going on, Sarge?" Brown watched the scouts pass by in the dark. "I think Admiral Way doesn't like what's going on, and we are his chess pieces on the board," Brown explained. Brown smiled a little toward the Nectari woman. "Tell me your name, if we're going to do what I think Admiral Way wants us to do," Brown said. "Adelaide is my name," the woman replied as the translator rendered her words. A deep silence fell inside the vehicle, broken only by the drumming rain. It lasted until Harley popped her head down from the weapon turret. "Sarge, the name," Harley prompted. Brown stayed quiet for a moment as the memory came back to him. 9 years ago, we rescued a female child from a brutal warlord in Sector 7. She had been kidnapped for ransom. "That was you," Brown said, looking straight into Adelaide's eyes. "I never got the chance to say thank you," Adelaide replied as the translator rendered her words. Brown shook his head, letting out a sharp breath as the irony settled in. "Tell me, what will happen after the exchange?" he asked. Adelaide lowered her head and spoke in a low voice as the translator rendered her words. "I will be displayed and publicly executed." Beck swallowed hard, her shoulders shaking as she started to cry. Brown narrowed his eyes at Beck and asked, "Lieutenant, do you know her?" "Yes, I know her. She's my friend," Beck confessed. "Then why were you pushing so hard for the delivery?" Brown asked, needing clarification. Beck looked him dead in the eye. "To make you mad enough to change your mind and help her," she answered. Gomez let out a sarcastic laugh from the back seat and said, "Ma'am, you only had to ask." Ayala glanced down as a warning light flashed across her dashboard. "Incoming message, Sarge." "It's Admiral Way," Ayala announced. Brown kept his eyes on the dark road ahead. "Go ahead and open it," Brown commanded. The video message came through with a burst of static as Admiral Way's face appeared on the center display panel. His uniform was soaking wet, and his face looked worn down. "Brown, I wish I could give you more details about what is going on, but my hands are tied. This mission stinks. I'm guessing by now you have figured out what I'm not allowed to say. This young woman has been put in a position with no way out. Son, I know you will make the right decision. I'm sorry, and be safe," Admiral Way said in the message. Gomez shifted in his seat. Harley stayed half inside the turret. Ayala kept both hands on the wheel, even though the vehicle was not moving. Beck looked away from the screen, and Adelaide watched Brown instead of the Admiral. The screen went black, prompting Ayala to look over at Brown. "That was all, Sarge," Ayala confirmed. Brown stared at the dead screen before he finally looked at Beck. Adelaide breathed against the vehicle glass and spoke in a low voice as the translator rendered her words. "It is okay. I have been waiting for this day for 9 years. I knew this day would finally come." Beck could not hold herself together as she listened to her friend accept what was waiting for her. She cried harder until she finally snapped. "Stop talking like that," Beck screamed. Gomez reached from the rear passenger side, tried to calm the lieutenant down. Brown turned around hard enough for the harness to pull tightly against his chest. "Lieutenant, stop and get hold of yourself," Brown shouted. Beck went quiet, breathing heavily as she slowly slumped back against the seat. Brown looked down at the route on the vehicle map and said, "We need to keep moving. Let's go." Beck had her head resting on Adelaide's shoulder by then, and Brown stared at them in silence. He was unable to ignore the bitter irony of Adelaide comforting the lieutenant, as if Beck were the one being sent to die. Brown made a radio transmission in a calm voice. "TOC, this is Black 6, over." Static hissed through the speaker for a few seconds. "Roger 6, over." The RTO replied. Brown sent to TOC his report. "Be advised, passing Charlie Papa Green and entering the dead zone, over." A moment later, through the static, the RTO replied. "Roger 6. Good copy. Over." Brown closed the transmission with "This is 6 out." Brown looked back at Adelaide and found her staring at him. "Boza die," she said in a low voice. The vehicle translator instantly picked up her words and rendered, "My destiny." Brown stared at Adelaide for a moment, reflecting on her words. The rain mixed with the heat, rising from the dead zone, and turned the road ahead into a gray blur. Due to poor visibility, Harley kept scanning from the turret, still alert after they lost the patrol earlier. The road suddenly vanished under the mix of rain and heat. Ayala shouted as the wheels lost the ground beneath them and began to slide. No! The vehicle swung left, snapped right, and dropped hard into something hidden in the mud. The impact woke Gomez with a curse, while Beck grabbed Adelaide tightly. Up in the turret, Harley twisted around and yelled, "Yo, easy, slow the heck down." Brown braced himself against the dash. He saw Ayala fighting the wheel with both hands. "Ayala, stop fighting it," Brown shouted. "Sarge, this thing is possessed by an evil spirit," Ayala shouted back. The vehicle kept sliding until stopped hard enough to make the metal frame groan. Brown sat still long enough to hear the engine ticking under the rain. Then he pulled his harness loose and stepped out with his weapon held low. He walked past the front of the vehicle and saw another human all-terrain vehicle buried deep in the mud. More of them waited ahead. They were half covered and rusting under the storm, lined across the dead zone like someone had driven an entire convoy into this place and left it there to rot. Harley shouted down from the turret, "What the heck is going on?" Brown walked back to the vehicle, grabbed the hand mic, and transmitted, "TOC, this is Black 6, over." The rain beat against the open vehicle door as the dead vehicles sat half buried in front of him. Static cracked through the speaker before a voice answered. "6, go ahead, send it over," the RTO said. Brown looked across the muddy field before tightening his grip on the mic. "Be advised, we hit a human ATV past green. I can see 10 to 15 vehicles buried in the mud, over," Brown reported. For a moment, only static came back. Then the voice returned, sounding thinner than before. "-6, your vehicle is the only one in that sector, over," the RTO stated. Brown stared at the hand mic for a second, before ending the transmissions, "Roger. 6 out." He looked back at the wrecks, sitting in the rain. He climbed back into the vehicle without taking his eyes off the field. "Ayala, back up," Brown instructed. Ayala swallowed hard and put both hands on the wheel. "Sarge, if this thing starts acting possessed again, I'm jumping out." Gomez leaned forward from the back and replied, "You jump out, I'm jumping after you. Because I'm not dying in no haunted mud." Brown ignored both, watching through the windshield as Ayala worked the vehicle backward. "Okay, that's far enough. Keep the vehicle to the right, Ayala, and let's find the road," Brown directed. The vehicle moved slowly and carefully until the tires found firmer ground and the road began to show again. Harley traversed the turret toward the way they had come. She stayed quiet for a long moment before her voice dropped through the hatch. "Sarge, what vehicles? I don't see no vehicles stuck." Brown turned and looked at Adelaide, but she was staring back at him, smiling. Brown looked at the map and pointed left. Adelaide lowered her eyes and said in a low voice, "Mia, Sil, Juve Mocktil." The vehicle translator rendered her words quickly and fluidly. "Don't do as I said. Do as I do." Brown looked at her for a second, surprised by the timing, but he ignored the comment and turned back to the road. "Ayala, go left," Brown ordered. Ayala slowed the vehicle and turned left. They had traveled no more than 200 meters before Brown spoke up. "Slow down, Ayala." "Slow down," Brown said. He looked down at the map again, then out through the windshield. "We are off course by a lot," Brown said. Ayala turned toward him with both hands still on the steering wheel. "Sarge, I took the left like you said," Ayala protested. Daylight pushed through the gray sky for the first time since they left Outpost Franklin. The rain stopped suddenly that everyone noticed the silence at once. Ayala looked up through the windshield, then down at the dashboard as every single light on the panel died. "Sarge, we just lost power," Ayala said, tapping the controls hard enough to rattle them. The engine coughed once, gave a weak shudder, and went silent. The tactical vehicle rolled a few more feet before stopping completely in the mud. Gomez leaned forward from the back seat and stared at the dead dashboard. "Please don't tell me the evil spirit won," Gomez said. Brown looked at the map, but the screen was completely black now. When he turned toward Adelaide, she was watching the road ahead. Can we step outside to stretch our legs, Sergeant? Beck asked. Brown looked at Beck, then at Adelaide, before giving a small nod as both of them exited the vehicle. The heat came down hard after the rain stopped, and nobody wanted to stand where the sun could reach them. Ayala kept messing with the vehicle controls while Gomez complained about sweating through his fatigues. Adelaide stepped closer to Brown and spoke in Galactic Common. Sergeant, we can only move at night, and we must move backward, Adelaide said. Brown stared at her in shock. You speak our language now? Brown asked. Adelaide smiled. Only here, she replied. Ayala looked over her shoulder from the open vehicle door. Hold up. Backward. Ayala asked. Adelaide made a soft vehicle engine sound. She leaned her body the way Ayala did when checking the rear mirrors, then pointed directly behind them. Reverse, Ayala said. Adelaide nodded, confirming with his C. Harley joked from the turret. No, don't tell me we are in the Twilight Zone. Gomez raised his voice from the back, correcting her. Dead zone, Harley. Dead zone. Night came slowly. When the first drops of rain finally returned, the dead dashboard lit up all at once. Ayala stared at the glowing panel as the engine turned over on its own, then looked over at Brown. Sarge, I'm not touching nothing, Ayala stated nervously. Brown looked at Adelaide. She only watched the road behind them and waited, prompting Brown to point toward the back of the vehicle. Ayala swallowed hard, shifted the vehicle into reverse, and drove strictly by using the mirrors. Up above, Harley kept the weapon turret turned to the rear. Nobody better ask me how to explain any of this, Gomez stated from the back. They moved that way until the road opened back to the exact point where they had gone wrong. Before Brown could even reach for the radio, a transmission came through. Black 6. This is TOC. Sitrep. Over. The RTO called out. Brown grabbed the hand mic and answered immediately. This is Black 6. We lost power, lost the route, and just regained movement. Over. Static rolled through the speakers before the RTO answered back. The voice sounded deeply unsettled. Black 6. Be advised, you have been off comms for 2 days. TOC out. Ayala slowly turned toward Brown. 2 days, Sarge? Ayala asked. Brown looked at the map as the route finally corrected itself. He pointed out through the front windshield. Ayala, turn right and get us back on course. They were back on the road before dawn, moving slowly through the rain. The route held steady on the map for the first time in 2 days. Ayala kept both hands on the wheel and said nothing. Harley kept the turret facing the rear. Gomez watched the dead stretch of road behind them like he expected the buried vehicles to come back. The radio squelched before a voice broke through. Black 6, this is Talon 1. Prepare to copy. Over. Brown reached for the hand mic. Talon 1, this is Black 6. Send it. Over. Admiral Way's voice came through rough, tired, and laced with static. 6, a situation has developed. I'm afraid I've got bad news. The Nectari royal family was attacked. All members are confirmed dead. Our intel suggests your escort will be next. Talon 1. Out. The transmission ended with static. Beck covered her mouth, letting a muffled sob break behind her hand. The silence inside the vehicle could have been cut with a knife. Adelaide placed both hands over her eyes and spoke one word in a low voice, Papiri. The translator rendered it soft and cold, alone. Brown did not give the silence time to settle. He turned and raised his voice. Weapons free. We trained for this, he said, making sure the whole squad understood the danger. Gomez sat up straighter and checked his weapon. Brown turned to Beck without softening his tone. Lieutenant, behind you is a black case with a weapon inside. Take it. Harley screamed from the turret. Contact. Drones. 3. 6 o'clock. Brown snapped his head toward the dashboard. Cloak. Ayala hit the cloaking system just as Harley's turret opened fire, ripping through the rain and tearing one drone apart dead center. A proximity alarm screamed inside the vehicle. Missile lock, Gomez shouted, staring at the flashing panel. How the heck can they pick up our signature through the cloak? The proximity alert counted down as the missile cut through the sky. 20, 10, 5, Harley shouted. Brace for impact. The missile twisted hard at the last second. It bounced wild through the rain and slammed directly into the drone that had originally fired it. Ayala stared through the windshield in shock. "That leaves one," Ayala screamed. "Fry that sucker," Gomez yelled. Brown tried to get in touch with the TOC, but there was no signal. He slammed the hand mic against the console. "We're being jammed," Brown shouted. Harley got angry and switched weapon systems, firing a microwave burst toward the last drone. The drone was shooting blindly everywhere as it tried to find the cloaked vehicle. Harley kept the microwave burst locked on until the last drone shook violently in the rain and dropped out of the sky in pieces. Ayala let out a long breath, keeping both hands tight on the wheel. "Tell me that was the last one," she said. Brown looked at the radio, then out through the windshield as the road narrowed between two black ridges ahead. "Keep moving. We need to find cover before they send something bigger," Brown said. Harley swung the turret forward while Ayala pointed ahead. "Sarge, cave mouth, 10 o'clock. Ayala yelled. Brown saw the dark opening cut into the rock and nodded. "Get us inside that cave now," Brown ordered. The vehicle rolled off the road and deep into the cave. The sound of the rain slowly faded behind them, and the squad finally had a safe place to regroup. Inside the cave, Brown stood near the dead radio and looked straight at Beck. "Who the hell knew about this?" Brown demanded. Beck tightened her grip on her weapon and answered, "Us, the royal family, and the council." Brown looked toward Adelaide. For the first time since the mission began, his voice completely lost its hard edge. "I'm not letting anyone hurt you. I swear it by my life," Brown said with conviction. Adelaide stared at him as the words reached her. She crossed her arms tightly over herself. Tears filled her eyes for the very first time. Adelaide said in a low voice, "Isimo Ivek D." The vehicle translator rendered it. "Finally. There you are." Ayala stepped out, grabbed the toolbox, and dropped it loudly beside the vehicle. From the toolbox, she grabbed a light and slid under the vehicle frame with the exact same focus she had when treating a soldier's wound. Gomez crouched near the cave mouth, keeping his weapon aimed toward the pouring rain, while Harley stayed up in the turret with the weapons quiet but ready. Brown watched Ayala's boots sticking out from under the vehicle until Gomez looked down and shook his head. "Mira, mujer, why do you look like you are about to do surgery on our ride?" Gomez asked with a sarcastic laugh. Ayala replied from under the vehicle, "Because I am." A few minutes later, something small hit the cave floor with a solid click. Ayala slid out from under the frame, holding a small black transponder in one hand. "Sarge, they used our own transponder to track us. Whoever is behind this went as far as hacking into our system," she said. Brown looked at the black transponder in Ayala's hand and nodded. "Without that transponder, can they track us?" Brown asked. Ayala tossed the black piece onto the cave floor. "Not unless they got eyes inside the vehicle," she replied. Brown then turned his attention to Gomez. "How far are we from Donai Tehran?" he asked. Gomez glanced at the dark navigation screen inside the vehicle and lifted his hands. "I don't know, Sarge. When Miss Ayala took that little thing out, we lost navigation entirely," he replied. "My bad. I'd rather be lost than dead," Ayala shouted from beside the vehicle. Brown snapped his head toward both. "Okay, cut it out. We navigate the old-fashioned way," Brown said. Harley let out a loud laugh from up in the turret. "Lost like mother," she started to say, but cut herself off with a giggle. Brown climbed back into the front passenger seat. "Everyone get in," Brown ordered as he pulled the old-fashioned map from the side pouch of his seat. Gomez leaned forward from the rear seat. "Does cloaking still work?" he asked. Ayala gave him the look and said, "I guess we'll find out soon." Brown opened the funny paper and looked over the route. "Okay, listen up," Brown announced. "We are about half a day from Donai Tehran, so keep your head in the game and stay sharp. Harley, weapons free. Gomez, watch our 6 and let us know if anything doesn't look right. Ayala, get us back on the road. Beck, if we go down, you are Adelaide's last defense." Beck nodded once without looking away from Adelaide. "Understood," Beck stated. Adelaide looked at all of them and said in a low voice, "Isimo Bome." The translator rendered, "My people." Rain ran down the glass in thick lines, bending the road into broken shapes. Far ahead, lightning flashed behind the clouds, showing the land for only a second at a time. Dead trees stood on both sides, lifeless, and the mud had swallowed everything for miles. Ayala brought the cloak up, and the vehicle faded into the storm as the tires found the road again. No one said anything for a while as Harley scanned for threats in the turret. Gomez watched the rear, and Beck stayed close to Adelaide. Then Adelaide began to hum, a soft and slow melody that filled the inside of the vehicle without needing words. A deep sadness settled inside the vehicle as they rode toward a place of death the war had formed. Hours later, they reached a dead end. A gate was built directly into the mountain. The mountain stretched left and right until the rain and darkness swallowed both sides. Brown looked over at Ayala. "Drop the cloak. Everyone stays alert, and keep your eyes open," Brown ordered. Ayala brought the vehicle out of cloak as Brown kept his eyes locked on the gate ahead. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the gate slid open slowly, showing a dark cave entrance behind it. Gomez leaned forward from the rear seat. "Another freaking cave? What's wrong with this place and caves? You got a plan, Sarge? Just tell me you got a plan," Gomez asked repeatedly. Brown stared straight into the opening. "Ayala, take us in slow. Everyone needs to trust me on this one," Brown ordered. Beck looked completely confused. They reached a wide chamber. Ayala brought the vehicle to a full stop. The chamber was filled with Nectari people, young and old, standing quietly in the dim light like they had been waiting there for a long time. There were no soldiers among them, only people. Harley yelled from the turret, "We are not in Kansas anymore." Brown stepped out of the vehicle first. Then, he waved the others to step out behind him as even more Nectari came out from the shadows. The crowd split down the middle, and an old woman with a cane walked slowly toward the group. Adeline moved from behind Beck and came forward. The old woman stopped directly in front of Adeline. She began to cry as she bowed her head and repeated, "Misai Reina." Ayala tried to follow the words. "Queen? Is she saying queen?" Ayala asked. The translator rendered, "My queen." Every single person standing there bowed their heads. Brown looked over at Adeline as she began to cry. Gomez looked around the massive chamber, then back at Brown. "Sarge, what's going on?" Gomez asked. Brown kept his eyes on Adeline and the Nectari people bowing to her. "I think the royal family played us. They needed their daughter somewhere safe, so they used us to get her here." Beck looked at him, still trying to understand everything. "You are not mad, Sarge?" Beck asked. Brown shook his head. "I'm not mad. I just want to know who is trying to kill Adeline," he replied. Adeline looked at the old woman. She placed her hands on the old woman's face, gently lifting her head. "I'm not queen. I'm just you," Adeline said as the translator rendered her voice clearly. She wiped her face as she walked back toward the squad, while every Nectari head stayed lowered in respect around her. Beck moved to follow her, but Adeline lifted one hand and stopped the lieutenant. She looked straight at Brown first, then at Ayala, Gomez, and Harley. "I thought my parents sent me here to die, and that felt worse than being betrayed." She paused, gathering the strength to keep talking. "I believe them. I was fooled just as you were. For that I'm sorry," Adeline said to the squad in broken galactic language. The old woman lowered her eyes as Adeline's voice shook without breaking. Brown kept his eyes on her. "You don't have to apologize for your parents' love," Brown told her. Beck looked at Adeline, then turned toward the old woman. "Can you ask her if they have comms?" Adeline translated the question quickly in Nectari. The old woman nodded and pointed deeper into the chamber, answering in a low voice. The translator rendered her words. "We have an operational communication station." Beck looked back at Brown. "Sarge, if that station works, we may be able to reach Admiral Way." Brown looked toward the dark passage the old woman had pointed to. "Then let's get him on the horn." Brown looked back toward Ayala. "Keep the vehicle ready. I'm about to make a call." Brown followed Beck toward the comm station, but Adeline reached out and grabbed his arm before he could go too far. She looked at him and spoke in broken galactic common, her voice calm. "All roads lead here to this moment. My parents were right when they spoke about you. You made a promise to me, but I wanted that promise for my people," she said, looking Brown in the eyes. Brown looked down at her for a long moment, then nodded. After speaking with Adelaide, he reached the comm station as Beck checked the old radio. "Does it work?" Brown asked. The radio cracked loudly with static. Beck looked at the controls. "Well, it does, but we don't have a frequency to call," Beck replied. Brown reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of old emergency frequencies. "Try this frequency," Brown said. Beck keyed in the numbers, grabbed the hand mic, and called Talon 1. "This is Black 6, over." Nothing came back but dead static. Beck looked at Brown. "Nothing, Sarge." Brown looked closely at the frequency again. "Change to the next one." Beck changed the frequency and keyed the mic again. "Talon 1. This is Black 6, over." Suddenly, a voice broke through the speaker. "Roger, Black 6. Sitrep, over." Brown took the mic directly from Beck. "This is 6 actual. The crown is secured. Over." A long silence followed over the airwaves. It felt like an eternity. 6. The council was responsible for the royal family tragedy. Situation volatile. Stay put. Over. Admiral Ways said. "This is 6. Roger, out," Brown said. When they turned around to leave the comm station, they found Adelaide standing right at the door with tears forming in her eyes. Beck slowed down when she saw her. "Did you hear all that?" Beck asked gently. Adelaide looked at Beck for a quiet moment. Then she stepped forward and placed her head against Beck's chest, gripping her uniform shirt lightly like she needed something steady to hold on to. Brown looked at them both, then waved one hand toward Beck. "I'm stepping out. We'll talk later." Brown walked back and found the rest of the squad waiting near the vehicle while the Nectari moved quietly around them. "Change of plans. We're staying," Brown announced. Gomez lifted both hands like he already knew he was not going to like the answer. "How long are we talking, Sarge?" Brown shook his head. "I don't know, man." Harley looked around the wide, open area, then shrugged from her perch beside the turret. "Well, this place is not bad at all." Ayala was sitting flat on the ground near the front tire with a small Nectari bowl in her hands, chewing happily like she had discovered a treasure. "You guys need to try this. It tastes like chicken," Ayala said happily. Harley laughed and looked down at the bowl. "Earth chicken, chicken of the sea, and now space chicken. Are you sure that is not one of those lizards we saw in the other cave?" Ayala looked completely dumbfounded. She smelled the contents of the bowl and then kept right on eating anyway. Brown looked at his squad, smiling as his eyes landed on Gomez. "Okay, Gomez, bust out the bones."